Hey everybody, I received at least one comment in one of my previous videos wondering if I could share a little more details about this ZF5 transmission swap into this 69 F-100. So I thought I'd just make a real quick video just showing some of the things that I had to do in my case to go ahead and make it work and to get it mounted up. Because I think some people think it could be a fairly straightforward swap, but there's a few things that probably need to be considered before you go ahead and take that jump with your bump side or dent side pickup. So let's just jump right into it. In the case of this pickup, it originally had a 360 in it, and so I was swapping over a 460 and a ZF5 from a 91. And so there's not a lot of different swap stuff out there. I started looking at some of the parts that L&L had, and so I'd found on eBay a used set of frame mounts for supposedly a swap into a 69 F-100. When I compared these frame mounts to what was in their factory, I think I could have probably used the same ones, but I thought there might be some stuff where I might have to cut it up, and so I went ahead and just used the ones I bought. I also used a different motor mount. So those L&L swap mounts are kind of a sandwich style, rubber platform thing with a stud. I had read some situations where it looked like higher horsepower stuff where they're actually coming apart and the motor mount was failing. So I didn't want to do that. So I went ahead and found these motor mounts that are a little more heavy duty. I can't remember actually who they're from now, like Bronco Graveyard or Auto Fab or somebody like that. I can't remember. There's several different places that have them. So when I first set this engine in here with the mounts, it sat things awful high. I put it at a pretty big angle. Of course you set it down and then you kind of jack your transmission up, in this case almost against the floor, to kind of see where it wants to sit. I thought it was too high, so I went ahead and took the mounts out and I cut 1/2 inch out so it would go ahead and sit the entire thing a little bit lower. I actually wish I probably would have cut about another 1/2 inch out, to tell you the honest truth, and I'll go into that here in a second. So anyway, that's the situation with those mounts. The reason why I wish I would have cut a little bit more out of it, this engine, a little hard to see, sits at a kind of a big angle here. Normally I think you want your engine to sit at about 3 degrees, especially at a carbureted application. In this case, this engine sits at about 6 degrees. And the only way, to make that better is there's two things. Either raise up the transmission, which in this case I was up against the floor, or you lower the engine. And so we'll see how this works down the road. Maybe I have to go ahead and lower this engine some at some point. But for now, we're going to go ahead and run it like this. So a couple things, just looking at engine angle and everything, it gets a little bit tight. These 460s have such a big, huge, ginormous bell housing there. It just kind of comes up out of nowhere. It gets a little bit tight, as you can kind of see. I'll zoom in a little bit. It gets a little tight where that flange is for the body. What I would do if I was doing this again and had it out for the 4th or 5th time would be to go ahead and trim that back some before I went to do my final install. I did not do that. It's kind of in there for good now, and so I'm just gonna have to put up with it. But it does make it a little more interesting to get it in and everything. But for the most part, my clearance doesn't look too bad. And we'll go ahead and show you what it looks like from this side over here. See if I can get weaseled in here. So this is probably the tightest spot. For those of you that know these old Fords, know that they don't sit in here square. They're offset toward the passenger side more. But this is actually kind of the tightest spot right there that you may have to deal with. So now that I show you that, let's go ahead and show you what it looks like underneath. We'll do our best down here to try to show you the things that you're looking for. There's the existing transmission cross member. So you can see that eyelet there. You can kind of see at the point of my finger. That's where the emergency brake cable goes. And then of course you have the entire cross member. That's where the transmission mounts, and then of course on each end of it is where it goes up and bolts to the frame. These cross members here aren't really made to come in and out
you know, very easy. It's just kind of one of those designs that once it's in there, it's kind of in there for the life of the vehicle. Let me scoot here a little bit so let the camera adjust to the light. So that's where that mount goes. And so you can see that, where's my finger here? You know, there's this hole, and there's this hole, and there's a couple holes there in the frame. As you can see, it doesn't line up at all. So, once again, let it adjust. So I made an entirely new cross member. And so one of my mounting holes is actually in that existing mount. And then of course I have a mount there to the frame, you know, on the bottom. But where the ZF5, where it mounts is almost like at least a half, maybe 3/4 of a transmission width, transmission cross member width back from where that 435 sat. So I went ahead and just, of course, made myself an entirely new cross member, full width there. I just went ahead, I had some channel laying around. I'd made a sled deck at one point, and so I just made it even match the angle, you know, of what that existing mount was. Now, it may look like it hangs down, you know, a bit, but of course it's actually not much lower than what the existing cross member was. It sits higher than what the rear end is and everything, so I don't think it's going to be a problem. It does sit just a little bit lower than where the transfer case is, which is probably a good thing. Went ahead, and whether it's the right thing or not, I don't know. So when I got my transmission jacked up, the angle it needed to be at against the floor, and then my engine sat in there, like I said, it sits about 6 degrees. So I went ahead, and when I made my mount for the transmission itself, I went ahead and angled it so it sits at 6 degrees as well. So that sits the transmission mount, you know, square on top of that channel. So I hope it's heavy duty enough. I think it will be, and I guess time will tell. But once again, you can kind of see that's the difference. This is about where the center of the existing cross member would be, and this is that new one that I built. So I put the transmission in there. I brought the whole unit. So it's got the 1356 transfer case, and as you can see, it doesn't quite fit, you know, in this frame. So I put a notch in it, which I'm sure some people are cringing big time at, as something you don't really want to do, and I agree with that as well. One of the things I'm planning on doing is that I've got some square bar and some different stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and weld that in there and reinforce that section where that notch is. So I don't think it's gonna be a big deal in the big swing of things. Now, one of the topics we should be talking about as well is that this pickup originally, of course, had a 2-piece drive shaft, and as you can see, there's a 1-piecer in it right now. So some of you are probably wondering, well, how does that work? So one of the things, if we look up here, you can kind of see where those mounting holes are. That's actually where that carrier bearing assembly was for that 2-piece drive shaft. So this whole assembly with the ZF5 and this 1356 is actually long enough that when you look at it, you know, the 1-piece drive shaft really isn't any longer than the longest piece of that 2-piece drive shaft. So I went ahead and decided, you know, I think I can go for it, and hence there's a 1-piecer in it. Now some of you may be wondering, okay, so what did that do for you as far as your pinion angle and that sort of thing? I was actually worried about that, you know, a little bit. So, you know, I set the engine transmission at 6 degrees. I went ahead and thought, okay, that's my angle down on the transmission. What's my angle up here at the rear end? And when I measured it with the angle gauge, it actually was sitting at 6 degrees up. So I really lucked into it. I didn't have to do a dang thing back there. So I went ahead and got a drive shaft made, you know, the proper length, and went ahead and slapped it right in there. So I think it's gonna work. One of the things I may want to do, I don't know, is that the transfer case, you know, does sit back a bit from the transmission and from the mount, it may be worth making some sort of mount for the transfer case, you know, to the frame, just to hold it, you know, a little more static in case you got into some extreme off-roading, high horsepower sort of situations. But for the most part, that's what it looks like underneath. So let's go look in the cab. There's nothing too exciting to see in here. Of course, that's just the factory transmission cover. That nice little piece of handiwork, I don't know what the cause of that was. Somebody had mangled this pickup long before I had it. I don't know what the cause for that was, but it's just in there. So, you know, I could probably take that out there and make that piece a little smaller and weld it in, but I'm not that worried about it. Where does the shifter position go? Shifter position was originally a little bit forward, so I went ahead and I made a little plate here, and so covered in the hole a little bit, and that shifter sits back just a little bit. So of course, if I look at a wider angle, it ends up being pretty nice, you know, where that shift tower sits. So nothing too crazy to look at here. I'm gonna walk to the other side, kind of see what the transfer case shifter looks like. Time will tell if I did the right thing here or not. So the transfer case shifter right now, I left it like it was in the 91, where it comes out of the side of the transmission hump. The original, of course, location is where that oval is. I've seen some situations where people have actually messed around with the linkage and had it come up in that factory location. But for right now, I'm going to leave it like it was in that 91. So I'm sure some people are kind of wondering, yeah, okay, it comes out the side. I know where your leg goes for the throttle. How's that going to work? So I think it's going to go ahead and work okay. I've been bending on this shifter a little bit and just kind of looked at where I thought the bend needed to go. You can see I got a tape mark still on there, just kind of showing where I need to bend. I tried heating that thing up and doing it in my vise and beating around on it, and I just didn't have any luck at all. It's kind of at wit's end there before I realized that I have a 20-ton Harbor Freight special press, and so I went ahead and just started putting it in the press and kind of bending around a little bit here, a little bit there. I think I have a bend that's going to work. So that's kind of the angle. Of course, my leg's going to go out, and you can see it shouldn't be a problem. And as of right now, it doesn't look like it's going to interfere, you know, with the shifter either. So I'll go ahead and probably start trying to use it. And if I need to rebend it a little bit, you know, so be it. I will do it. One of the things I haven't quite got figured out yet, I don't know what the boot's going to look like for this transfer case shifter. The one out of the 91, it's not quite the right shape to match the transmission tunnel. And I think that boot wasn't real great anyway. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I think I can find a aftermarket type boot that I can just, you know, screw into the floor there, and I think it's going to work out okay. So those are the highlights of this ZF5 swap into this 69 F-100. Hopefully that's helpful to people. I guess if for some reason there's something there that you need to know a little more information, I guess let me know in the comments, and I'll try to detail out a little bit more what I did. Earlier in the video, I showed the spot where that emergency brake cable snaps into. I'll need to go ahead and fab up something underneath so I can go ahead and make that work. But other than that, I think it's going to be okay. For those of you that wondering what I'm doing, of course, from the clutch situation, I have that other video out there where I detailed how to use manual linkage for this setup. So once again, I guess if you have any questions, you know, let me know. I'll try to help you out, and I hope this video helped, and thank you for viewing.